the arguments, the hard truths, the needs, the wants, the feelings that you ignore and avoid sharing today become the arguments and the resentments and the trauma that you will end up experiencing tomorrow and in later times in your life.
If you're so concerned about how what you're going to say is impacting the other person, maybe you're telling yourself, I don't know, they might get upset. I don't know if I should say that because honestly, it might cause a big tiff. This is because there's the ego and you're dancing around it. What if you didn't have to? That's what this episode is all about.
Hey everybody, what is going on? It's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia.
I thought you were gonna. I didn't know you were stopping there. The way you said it, you ended on a high note there.
Yep, just cliff drop.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. After a great start. One of the things that I love so much is that a lot of the clients that we work with have been working with us for a pretty long time. I mean, I have some clients that have been working with me for 3 years, and I know you have the same. And there's one in particular that I'm thinking about. He and I have been working together for a couple of years, and he's really starting to unpack a lot of the challenges and a lot of the traumas and harms and experiences that he's had and that are really impacting his life and his quality of life. And one of them is the really disruptive and difficult situation and experience and relationship that he has with his dad and his family at large. He grew up in a home where the dad had severe anger issues, was very, very emotionally unintelligent, emotionally unaware, and was very verbally and emotionally abusive and manipulative. And everyone in the family basically learned, avoid dad at all costs, don't step on dad's toes, and everything that happens in the house is to basically ensure that nobody pisses off dad. So nobody can be loud. He worked the night shift, so he'd sleep in the middle of the day on the couch in the middle of the house. So nobody was allowed to make noise. Everybody had to tiptoe. Everybody had to be careful of what they said. And there was basically collusion happening of, we all know this is happening. We all know how destructive this is, but nobody's allowed to say anything because dad works so hard. And dad is just really struggling. And it's because of his job, and his job is the problem. And we all need to just do anything we can to make him happy. Now my client is in his late 20s, and after going through a childhood of basically having to tiptoe around his dad's delicate emotions and insecurities, he now really struggles with being able to identify and understand and recognize his own emotions and feel safe in his body. Because he's had to deny and ignore and contort his feelings and experiences his entire life because the narrative was, don't piss off dad. Protect dad at all costs. Protect dad's ego. And everyone in the family was like in this silent agreement to that.
Wow. There's a lot of that happening. There's a lot of that happening. And, you know, we also have a lot of male clients that are in that boomer generation that are finally opening up and realizing, if you will, the errors of their ways and saying like, oh, I didn't realize how destructive and detrimental that was for my children at the time because no one had taught us. Right. So this episode isn't just about painting one person in the picture. It's really, we want to make sure that from a professional concern standpoint, we talk about some of the biggest core limiting beliefs that we are seeing crop up in the Evolve community behind the scenes when we've been working long term with these incredible individuals who are having these experiences tied back to these core beliefs that are really detrimental and destructive. And it literally like disassociates or disconnects is a better word, our clients from their life, their experiences, what they want to be, who they want to be in the world. And so, B, one of the things that you and I have talked about is how the limiting belief around feeling responsible for someone else's emotions has been so pervasive, right? So this is a belief, and for anyone that's new joining us, a limiting belief is essentially that mental script or cognitive script that is preventing you from having the outcomes in your life that you want. It is that glass ceiling, I like to have us picture it with, in your head, that is telling you you can't do things, you can't be this, you can't do that, right? It's rooted in the base narrative that you can't. And so by definition, it inhibits your accessibility to specific doors in life, and it can get really pervasive. So with that, right, the core belief that is here, that's present in your client and in many clients that I have as well, is needing to tiptoe around other people and their delicate sensibility. Now, why do we feel as though we have to do that is the question that we want to kind of come from. Like, what is going on underneath there to where there has been a core belief that essentially it's like programming a GPS to go to a destination and making sure that you avoid all potholes, right? Like it's making sure that you don't do specific things. And in this case, when you have a core belief that I'm responsible for dad's emotions, or I'm responsible to keep dad happy, or mom, or whomever, right? Because it's not just dads. I'm sure there's a lot of moms that can fit into this bucket, grandmas, grandparents, whatever, caregivers that can fit into this bucket, where because of their inability to manage their emotions and to have anger and disgust and fear and overwhelm and stress be actually something that can be worked through and partnered with to have not spill over into the family systems to where everyone feels like they need to walk around and dance around the emotional experience of an individual, right? Like, why is that core belief in place in the first place? Why and what are the implications of having that core belief, that feeling responsible for other people's emotion? And what does that ultimately impact in the negative way if you are not uprooting this core belief? I can think of so many different clients that we've talked about in this. A woman who, she's an entrepreneur and she's also a nurse. Someone who literally this core belief was so deeply ingrained within her central nervous system that it then spilled over into her partnership. She felt as though she needed, and she was single-handedly responsible for her partner, making sure that there was not an emotional reaction, because that, again, in her mind, that would be the worst case scenario, going back to her childhood of when, again, it just so happened to be her father, right? Or her mother as well, would blow up at the most inconvenience, the simplest inconvenience. So what I want to talk about is then also how that starts to integrate into the work setting, into the intimate relationship setting. How when we are protecting the ego and making sure that no one feels anything, or we don't inconvenience, disrupt, or start drama with someone because of their inability to manage their emotions, what does that do? What does that do on an individual level? What does that do in an intimate level? What does that do on a team scale? What does that do at a bigger scale? So B, would you mind sharing some of the things that you've seen and heard and experienced, obviously confidentially, but on the bigger scale of themes and trends? What has this core belief of I am responsible for managing my dad's emotions, what has that done as this adult is entering into their life? How has it impacted them? What are the doors that have not been opened as a result of this core belief? I have definitely some experiences that I want to share on this, but I want you and I to rumble a little bit in the best way to really help our listeners recognize that, whoa, maybe I have this core belief too. And most importantly, by the end of this episode, help them identify where that core belief is coming from and then what they can do to start to maybe challenge that core belief.
So I'm going to speak kind of high level for a second.
Yeah.
In a CBT lens, if you look at a core belief isn't just the one concept. And I know you know this, but I'm talking to our audience.
Yeah, no, please. Please.
A core belief is not just, it's not just the one narrative. So you might have that one big script, I am responsible for the emotions of other people, but then underneath that, there are also secondary beliefs, attitudes, rules, and assumptions that are entwined in that. And so if you have a core belief that I am responsible for the emotions of other people, then you also have assumptions that if I am not hyper alert and hyper vigilant to the emotions of everybody else, I am going to be in danger. If someone is unhappy around me, I am unsafe. If I am happy and someone else is not, then I am a bad person. So there's all of these underlying beliefs and narratives and assumptions underneath that one core belief. And that is shaping your entire experience of the world. And that is exactly what happened with this client. It not only was his father, but he also became the protector of his mother and his two sisters. So he basically identified and became identified with the narrative of, I have to be the protector. I have to be everybody's savior. My emotions don't matter. I don't matter. I'm going to take the brunt of dad so I can protect everybody else. And my experiences are not important. So then he, in his life, in every friendship and every relationship and every job experience, his entire narrative and the lenses through which he was living his life was, I sincerely do not matter. What I want and need doesn't matter. What I am here for is to ensure that everybody else around me is okay. That is the role and the function that I serve. And only then am I going to be safe. That is a losing game. There's 8 billion people in this world. That means that you are never going to be okay. That your needs are never going to take precedence, because if you're responsible for the emotions and the functioning and the life of 8 billion other people, you're going to spend your entire life playing that game, and you're never going to be first, second, third, fourth, 7 billionth on that list. You're going to be dead last.
You're
Because if
not
your
even going to be
sense,
on that list even.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. If your entire sense of safety is predicated on the emotions and you're controlling the emotions of other people, you're playing a losing game, because it is literally impossible to always be hyper vigilant to other people and what they're thinking and feeling. Basically, you're expecting yourself to be a mind reader and to be able to know, this is what this person is thinking, this is what this person is feeling, this is what they are going to do, this is what I'm going to have to do to interject. And you end up playing these mind games. Now, here's the thing. People can actually do that. You're not
Yeah.
mind reading. You become really good at prediction.
Mm-hmm.
Our brain is a prediction machine. The entire function of our brain is to keep our body safe. And one of the ways that it does that is making predictions. So if every day at 6 p.m. I can tell my dad's mood by the way he puts his keys in the door, if it's very aggressive, I know it's going to be one day. And if I barely hear it and it's a light door open, I know it's going to be another. Yeah, you kind of become a mind reader. Because you have data to support the fact that when it happens like this is what happens to me. And if it happens like that, that's what's going to happen to me. So then your entire life becomes, how can I predict outcomes in advance based on other people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors? You're screwed. You're screwed. Because it's a losing game. You're going to do that for the rest of your life, and your emotions and your experiences will always be last.
Now I want to zoom out and take this into the clients that I have that are now in their mid 50s, some of them in their 60s, and even on the other kind of spectrum of this. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love that we become prediction machines. That's what we are. And you become, quote unquote, really good at reading people. But what is that at the expense of? I want to share one of my clients who, he's in his mid 50s, owns a really successful business. He has the ability to create his own schedule. He has the ability to hire and fire anyone that is not a great fit for the business, right? And all of the lifestyle that he has, all of the quote unquote external success, those dreams have all come true. Now, where is in business, though, is the other end of this, where he's had this core belief. He's responsible for other people's emotions to an exponential degree that had never gotten addressed in his 20s, like your client B, which thank goodness that he's taking the chance on himself to do the work and to recognize and uproot his core beliefs, his assumptions, the rules, etc. And one day he'll look back and be incredibly grateful for that. No doubt. But this client on the other end, who's in his mid 50s, he didn't get that addressed at 20 years old. So he's been living in this life for 50 years, shape-shifting himself to be a fraction of himself, or a better way to describe it is the version of him that everyone else wants of him, to make sure that no one has an emotional experience or reaction to him, so that he stays safe, which is out of self-preservation. Now, interestingly enough, he doesn't have a sense of self. And to me, that breaks my heart, because the place that he's been leading from for the last 10, 15, 20 years in business has been from not a stable ground, not a deep sense of who he is, but rather the version of himself, the shell of himself that other people had wanted him to be, or that he perceived he needed to be in order to not rustle any feathers. And this, actually, we've learned from the work that we've done, stemmed back from protecting his mother's ego, making sure that he dances around mom's ego. So this goes both ways. It's not just protecting from the male ego, it's also protecting from the female ego and the ego in general. And because mom would get upset, because mom was super overwhelmed, because mom was this, mom was that, at the core root of it, mom was not attuned to how her emotions and her lack of emotional awareness, intelligence, self-awareness, self-regulation impacted the family. He essentially developed a core belief that he is responsible for everyone else's emotions. He became the protector, in other words, right? And so over time, that protector role, it wasn't his family and his brothers and whatever. It became whoever he was doing business with, whoever his team members were. And so, like, the outcome of that, right? If I were to graph on a trend, the amount of income that he could have earned, the amount of fulfillment, the amount of health, longevity, etc., to where he actually is in all of those same metrics, what he could have been in the 50 years of his life would have been exponentially more healthy, more fulfilled, more in love, a better leader that could have had a bigger legacy, and everything that, quote unquote, shows his levels of success now could have at least tripled. But yet, because he didn't address his core belief that he is actually not responsible for other people and their emotions, that made his focus go to pretty much like shape-shifting instead of actually developing a core sense of self, right? So whether it's in the personal and family realm or the professional and career realm, these core beliefs become so deeply entwined, like you mentioned, and they continue to prevent us from opening up doors, or rather working on the best version of ourselves, the wholesome, wholehearted, truest version of ourselves. And that's the concern that I want to bring forward.
Well, the hard thing is, it's based in reality. There's one of the things that I talk to a lot of my clients about, and I know you do too, is a lot of the beliefs that we have that are not helping us today are based in realities that were true at some point. So if you
Right.
take someone who, let's say, was in the military and they were a veteran and they were overseas on active duty, yes, it makes perfect sense that anyone who comes up to you that is not in your unit might be a threat. Any loud sound, realistically, it could be a bomb or it could be something like that. So when you take a situation like that, that's rooted in reality, that you were in literal physical danger and you did have to be on edge and you did have to have your guard up. And if you were not bold and courageous, you would literally die.
Mm.
It makes perfect sense. But taken out of the context of the situation, it is no longer true. And the challenge that so many of us have is that we have a really hard time being able to identify, yes, this was true in those circumstances and this was true in that reality. However, I am no longer in that reality. And now my beliefs, rules, emotions, attitudes, assumptions, and behaviors and relationship dynamics now need to change.
Mhm.
It's really challenging because the brain, again, like we said, it picks up on a script and it runs with it because it's safer to assume you're in danger than it is to believe that you're not, especially and particularly when you have had experiences that show you that that is the case. So we're not just
Mm.
saying just change your belief and you'll be fine. You change a belief through exposure and through experience and through determining what was true then and what's true now, and how do I bridge the gap and then make these adaptive changes over time.
Yeah. In over time, something that's coming to mind for this right now is you know that I do a lot of work with couples and the relationship dynamics between intimate partners and conscious
Mm-hmm.
couples and whatnot. And so one thing that's coming to mind is how this shows up in relationships, intimate relationships, and how over time, like for example, when we get into a session, and Alan and I, my partner, for anyone that's joining us, when we get into a relationship talks coaching session, we sit down. There are so many times that I hear the men in the relationship, if it's male, female, the men feeling so incapable of actually expressing their emotions because they haven't been taught how to do so, right? Like, for example, that client, he was taught and learned to manage other people's emotions, which prevented his allocation of focus and development in actually naming his own emotional experience, right? So I have a lot of people who will show up and start doing this relationship talks coaching with Alan and I, that the male in the relationship will not, or will be underdeveloped in contrast, in comparison to the female in the relationship in the speaking around emotions world, right? And what I notice is that the female in the relationship will try to articulate what the male is feeling and experiencing. And when we look at the pattern of their relationship, has done that multiple times. Number one, out of fear that he won't be able to handle his emotions and the emotional state that comes with that. And then number two, out of not wanting to make sure that he feels any sort of negative emotion. And so what do you have when two people are in a relationship and there's one partner that has unconsciously taken responsibility for his emotional states, his emotional experience, his emotional articulation of his experience? You have one partner that's coming in with what's called ruinous empathy, where you want to make sure that the male doesn't feel anything and prevent him from his own feelings and his own emotions at the expense of his own development in his emotional set, which just becomes a whole dynamic that then creates an even bigger gap in intimate relationships of the male being able to communicate. And I'm not just saying men, like, I just think that it's an incredible term that we need to understand, ruinous empathy, which is preventing a male from actually feeling his emotional experience out of fear or concern or a belief here that he's not capable of that. And what is that telling the men of our world? And that's where another concern comes up. What are we telling men and women when we have empathy or preventing that ego from feeling anything? We're telling them that they're not capable of experiencing, of naming, of labeling, and of witnessing and working with their emotions. We're instead, when we do that unconsciously, telling them that they're not capable of doing that, they shouldn't, that their experience doesn't matter, et cetera, et cetera. So that just came up when we were started talking about that, because it's like, it's easy to point a finger when we talk about ego, emotions, the limiting belief around responsibility for emotions and our own experiences. It's also really important to pull in the conversation of like what we're doing to contribute to that.
I also think that people struggle so much with that because of how many people have been severely harmed by men who could not control their emotions. So we're being very proactive in trying to protect ourselves by just kind of bypassing that. Like you and I have
100%.
direct experience of men who could not control their emotions and whose emotions were physically, mentally, emotionally taken out on us and everyone around them, men included. And the dire and severe consequences of that. I say that not to bash men, but because men who end up like that had fathers who were like that typically, or had people in their lives who were like that, and they never learned what emotional attunement was and emotional identification and how to process your thoughts and feelings. I sent you this video that a client had sent to me, the comedian Bill Burr. I don't typically watch his content, and he's very abrasive with his jokes. So watch this video with a grain of salt if you choose to watch it. But this was perfect. And this was actually the same client who was telling me this situation with his father. Bill Burr had this entire joke where he was talking about the fact that men are only allowed typically to express two emotions, angry and fine.
No.
And men, if they ever do try to experience any sort of emotion other than that, people get very scared and they try to shut them down, and they struggle to allow men to have a wider range of emotions because of the person on the receiving end's discomfort. So men are basically taught, just stay quiet. And the only emotions that you're allowed to express are be fine and have no problems and kind of just be there and exist, or show anger. That's what's appropriate. So when that's what's perpetuating, of course, this is just going to be the cycle that repeats over and over again. Now, what we are not saying, again, is that you are responsible for fixing that. However, you can, by your own essence and to what you were saying, through you developing a true sense of self, can be a safe person and a safe energy that allows people to feel safe to do the same thing. Not because you're manipulating and contorting and doing all of these things to make people feel safe, but because you inherently are a safe person that then allows the other person to feel safe in return.
Yeah. I remember I had shared that with my own father, and he's a boomer, and I asked him what he thought, or how do you feel about that? And he cheeky said, I feel fine. I'm like, Dad, you missed the mark. That was our opportunity to bond and get vulnerable. And it's like,
that's perfect though.
Right.
That was perfect.
He's so funny. And like I think that if I were to share that with any of my male clients, they would endorse that. That is their experience. And again, when I look and if I were to share that with my female clients, they would likely have an interesting experience with that as well, because they have their own version of that, right? And I know that there are many women that I've worked with who have had a very dominant mother figure in their life, who have had very masculine egos, and usually that has been out of necessity, right? Out of making sure that the family is provided for, whether the husband had died or whether they were just more skilled and competent. And a lot of that ties back down to who's the quote unquote breadwinner of the family, right? To the client story that you had mentioned earlier. And a lot of experiences that I'm seeing, at least from the overlap of whoever is the quote unquote power or authority figure in a system of relationships. It could be the intimate relationship, could be the family dynamic. It could be in this case, in the business context, the boss. Whoever is the quote unquote higher power, higher status, or has this even elder positioning, we need to fawn so that there isn't an emotional outburst. We need to make sure that we are praising and respecting the elders, or praising and respecting our partner because he or she is the breadwinner. And there's that fawning that kind of goes on to not rustle the feathers or to have an emotional reaction. And when you start to overlay the power dynamics that are at play to why this core belief of I am responsible for their emotions starts to overlap into this dialogue, we start to get into some of the bigger conversations around this that we won't have time for today, but how power and emotional regulation overlap. And I think that that's a really good place that I'm going to close so that we don't trail off into another dialogue.
It's not only the breadwinner though, it's who is the like authority. So
yeah, I think that's a better word.
I have many clients that I can think of where it was a heteronormative family dynamic. The father was technically the breadwinner, but the mom was in charge and everybody knew it. And everybody knew that if mom was unhappy, everybody was unhappy. And everyone had to dance around mom's delicate sensibilities. And based on mom's mood, it was either going to be a really good day or a really bad day. And the father was included in that because he didn't feel safe enough to tell her, like, you need to stop or you need to... You need
like
to
happy
show
wife,
up
happy
differently.
Life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I hate that saying.
It's so stupid. If you want a practical to wrap this up, as the person who is struggling with their own emotional expression, so like if you're the person, like if someone sent you this video and is like, hey, this is you might want to listen to this. For the person who is struggling with their emotional expression and it's been made clear to you that you and your emotions, you need help regulating them. What I would say is start learning how to identify your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and the core beliefs that are running your life. It's not fair for the people in your life to have to tiptoe around you because you're struggling with your own emotion regulation. And so you end up lashing out on everybody else. It's not fair. It's not appropriate. It's not okay. Honestly, it's not. And this isn't to shame you, but it's to help you to actually be able to have the quality of life and the relationships that you do want, to be the type of leader that you want to be, the type of boss you want to be, the type of mother, father, sister, partner, friend, whatever it is that you are optimizing for being. It's going to give you the opportunity to show up in your life the absolute best way possible. If you are the person on the receiving end of that, you have to learn to stop. Over time, you have to learn that I am not responsible for their emotions. They are their own autonomous being, and I'm going to be okay because I can handle me if something happens. Developing the skills and the self-efficacy, so the self-belief to understand that I can handle challenges that come up to me and I don't have to dictate everybody's emotions to be safe. I can be safe because I've got me.
Yeah. One latter sentiment that I'll give clients who have this core belief that I'm responsible for their emotions. Usually it starts in the unconscious and then we suss it out, fluff it out. The latter step is I am responsible for my emotions first. Right? Because it's not going to be overnight that you're going to remove and pull out this core belief. Yeah. But if you do have a substitute that helps your brain contextualize syntax. So, okay, if you're going to keep the pattern of being responsible for other people's emotions, let's have the starting point at least be within yours. And that's a tiny little baby step that might help anyone that is struggling with that responsibility for others' emotions, right? The reminder that you're responsible for your emotions first and see where that takes you. So hopefully this episode gave you Number one, the acknowledgement that you're not alone. And number two, the fact that the ego, and I want to say the ego is not the villain here. Like it's not a bad thing. The ego is actually really important and very healthy. However, when the ego is what we're all dancing around as a result of a lack of self-awareness, self-regulation, and emotional intelligence, or a lack of emotional intelligence, that's where, it's not as helpful as it could be. So, with that being said, my episode suggestion in closing is 397. Every people pleaser needs to know this. Bianca, what is yours?
398, a powerful way to never be manipulated again. If you are listening to this on the day that this episode came out, so August 4th, it is a Monday. It is Movie Club Monday.
Ooh.
So if you are listening to this before 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are going to be having Movie Club tonight. It is a group of really growth-minded human beings, leaders, business owners, everyday humans who want the chance to geek out on movies and have really good conversations about movies that are really empowering and inspiring and that make a difference in the world. So if that's something that you're interested in, send us a message, send us a DM. We'll send you the registration link so that you can join, and we cannot wait to have you there. It's also okay if you have not seen the movie yet, because we're just going to geek out on important topics in general. So even if you haven't seen the movie, you can still be part of an important dialogue.
Movie Club has been such a fun place, and it's free. So we at Evolve always try to make sure that we have free, accessible, educational, and valuable resources available to you as Evolvers, because we know that having safe spaces where we can all grow together is so, so powerful. So let's geek out over this movie. We're not going to share what it is, but reach out to us and we will provide you the link to join us.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.